Meteorology is the science of study or observation of the Earth's atmosphere for forecasting weather patterns. For many millenniums, people have observed the skies to determine how the weather will be. Now, let's look back into history. So first, we will discuss the important people in the history and development of meteorology. Well, the earliest information about meteorology dates back to 340 BC when Aristotle, the famous Greek scientist, wrote Meteorologica, a book that gave a summary of meteorology. He was the first scientist to study meteorology. He made some hypotheses based on the four elements known as the water, air, fire, and earth. Afterwards, Evangelista Torricelli, a pupil of Galileo Galilei, invented the mercury barometer in 1644. The mercury barometer of Torricelli is an instrument used to measure the atmospheric pressure. The pressure makes the mercury rise into a thin graduated tube by which was possible to measure it. Then, Benjamin Franklin was the first to suppose that the atmospheric disturbance follow a trajectory. While he was in Philadelphia, he said to his brother to watch the lunar eclipse, which would be seen after some days. His brother watched it, but Benjamin failed to look at it because in Philadelphia, the sky was covered by the clouds. The day after, the same disturbance was in Boston, and thanks to this, he formulated his hypothesis. Other scientists didn't do much on the study until about the 17th to 18th century, when the thermometer and the barometer were invented. The knowledge took a fast pace, and in the 19th century, scientists began to do routine meteorological observations and send them through the telegraph. The first telegraph was invented in the 1844. It's an instrument used to communicate between distant places, and thanks to this, they could create the first grid of meteorological observations. Every morning, they link each other and share information about the weather. Then, Joseph Hendry made a map of the USA with the weather in each city. The first map was shown to the public in 1866. Meteorology as an exact science is relatively young, but measurements have been made through recorded history. Now let's look back to the important events in the history and development of meteorology. In 400 BC, rainfall is measured in India, and in pre-1600, predictions were based on recurring patterns, such as when the wind switches from east to south, expect as storms. There was no understanding of why these recipes worked and why they did not. In 1600, the measurement of surfaces quantities began. Isaac Newton develops his three laws of motion, the beginnings for the mathematical description of meteorology. In 1800, the beginning of the determination of the forces which act change the weather. Some simple theories and classifications are developed. And in 19th century, met observations were being made routinely, transmitted with the telegraph. In 1900, the understanding that the vertical structure of the atmosphere is important and must be measured. In 1944, the first quantitative map identifying the jet stream, and in mid-1940s to 1950s, radars were beginning to be used for weather experiments. In 1955, the first operational weather prediction model was run on an IBM computer. In 1960, the first weather satellite was launched into the space. It is called TIROS-1. In 1974, the first geostationary operational environmental satellite or GOES was launched. In early 1990s, the first next generation radar WSR-88D was implemented at the NWS Weather Forecast Office. And in 2000, the Weather Research and Forecasting Numerical Prediction Model was created to merge the forecast and research communities together. And up to this decade, dual Doppler radars and the next generation GOES satellites being used operationally.